You're listening to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, a travel podcast with hosts Stephen Seagraves, Fosma Moon, and Seth Miller. Hello, and welcome to episode 350 of Dots, Lines, and Destinations. I'm Stephen Seagraves, joined today by Seth Miller. Hey, Seth.
I'm going to call you the Colonel this episode. I apologize.
Why?
We'll get into that during the bonus topics.
Okay, all right. People have to stick around.
You have to stick around for that one. Is it an extra wide episode? Are we going to have more spacious seating on board?
No. I wish.
I don't know. I'm actually sitting in my desk chair for the first time in a while. It's pretty nice, pretty comfy.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got Ida, right? Like,
we had a couple inches of rain. Nothing like what happened in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, New York. That whole
just wild,
disaster.
Wild video coming out of all those places.
Yeah, New York wins a lot of the time because whatever. But and the subway videos were interesting. Part of me is like always wants to be like, yes, I understand. Like, no one wants to see the subway flooding like that and like look like a waterfall, but it is giant cut open holes in the middle of the street, so it's sort of where the water is supposed to go. It's just supposed to drain off very quickly.
Exactly.
But the like flooded out highways in downtown Philadelphia are actually like what really is just jarring to me.
Yeah.
So
I think, the thing about the subway is I think the videos that are funny is like when people go down into the subway, but it's so flooded like you can't get down the stairs.
Yeah.
And you see videos of people like start walking down and then they just kind of nope right out of it. They just turn right. You're just like, oh no.
I can either get soaked or I can get in that. So
and I don't know what's in that.
Yeah. I'd rather just be out in the rain that I can at least sort of understand what it is.
Yeah. Oh man! So tell me about Tunnels to Towers, because we have a mutual friend of the show.
Yep.
That's involved in this, and we're both going to Dorkfest in L.A. and this gentleman's based in Southern California. I don't think he's in L.A. Right? He's in San Diego, I think.
He's like not
between
quite, but he's between the two. He's out east near one of the Air Force bases.
Gotcha. So tell me.
We can call him Phil. We could actually name him.
Yeah, his name's Phil. Yeah, his name's Phil. You can follow him on Twitter if you want.
Yeah, you should. He's a good guy. Was one of the founders of NYC Aviation back in the day and was a dispatcher at National Airlines when it was doing a bunch of military charters. Worked at JetBlue as a dispatcher as well. Now he actually worked at JSX, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And then when they were out in Southern California, they moved their headquarters and he didn't want to move finally again. And so he now works for NBAA. He's an outreach ambassador for business jets. But the reason we're talking about it is he is upcoming 20th anniversary of 9/11 will be hiking one of the local mountains, hills. I guess it's 2,977 feet, which if I remember correctly, right, is the same height as the towers were. And the hill is marked with to reflect the elevation of the towers as well. And so he's doing that hike as a fundraiser for the charity. It's a group that works with the people who affected by the 9/11, the disaster and whatnot. So it's a good charity, good person. We have donated on behalf of DLD to support him. Would encourage others to consider doing so as well. Maybe the 2977 is how much money he's trying to raise. I don't know. There's a lot of numbers involved. It's not confusing. But he is hiking it wearing a weight vest and carrying a fire hose, which is sort of in honor of the firefighters who did similarly were weighed down as they tried to go in to help people 20 years ago. So
I mean, it's crazy to think it's been 20 years. Time's gone by faster than I thought,
Yeah, which, especially considering how both slow and fast the last 18 months have been, or 20 months now, it's even harder to imagine. But
and so people can donate and they can go read about this, and they can also likely meet Phil when
come out to Dorkfest and Spot LAX. I think he's going to be there.
I hope
he is. He hasn't said no to me when I've asked him. So
I think we're going to buy him a beer, or at least try to buy him a beer. So
we'll try. Open maybe container laws and whatnot.
It might have to be a hamburger.
Yeah.
So, cool. Tell me about slot squatting in New York City. Who's squatting? Everybody?
Yes, they are. Mostly American and United right now is the ones that have come up. So, right, the challenge here is that JFK and LaGuardia are among the very few airports in North America where you have use it or lose it rules. If you don't use the slots, you don't get to keep them. They are considered highly prized. And getting them allocated, there basically are no new ones to allocate. So in many cases, so getting access to the slots is challenging, especially LaGuardia and DCA National. But JFK, depending on who you listen to, also is challenged in that front. And one of the issues related to COVID has been that there isn't enough demand to justify, continuing to fly all the flights. And so schedules were cut and whatnot. Thus far, we've gone through summer 2020, winter 20/21, and now summer 21, where regulators have at some level offered relief from the use it or lose it rule, which is generally if you don't use the slot 80% of the time, you can lose it. It will be revoked. And the U.S. government has not announced a similar relief for the upcoming winter season, which starts on Halloween. That's Saturday, Sunday. That's just the 30th and 31st of October this year. So it's always sort of the end of that month. And basically, if the U.S. government does not allow for some sort of leniency on that front, the airlines have to fill these slots, and I use have to, put that in scare quotes if you want, or they have to give them up or risk giving them up. And there are many other U.S. airlines that would love to try to grab them. And so in an effort to make sure that they can keep the slots while also minimizing loss of money and minimizing risk and expense and all those other things, they make stupid choices. Like, I know, we'll just fly between Dulles and LaGuardia 9 times a day on a, 50 or 70 seater. Yeah. Or I think that was the United. I think American has Philadelphia and BWI from JFK. Really? At like similar levels. I think it's 7 a day. Huh. It's a unfortunate number of flights that are going to basically just burn jet fuel for no good reason and burn money for no good reason, and not really serve much in the way of passenger value. So on the one hand, I understand where the airlines are coming from in terms of wanting to keep their slots and saying that the rule is stupid or should be waived for them. On the other hand, one of our listeners raised this as a comment on Twitter to us, like, couldn't American, I don't know, work with JetBlue and pick some routes with their Northeast Alliance that might actually be useful and try to start a couple new routes? And maybe not for all the slots, but do some creative things and see if they can make real money instead of just burning less with these routes that no one is going to fly. Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess on the other hand, if it still is an 80-20 rule, they can just rotate which one they cancel every day on the ones that they know no one's flying and, reduce their costs a little bit extra there. But it's still kind of ridiculous the way that they're approaching the schedule. And, we could probably derail this into a conversation about slots in general and do airlines basically deserve free, and it wasn't always free, but free access to these limited resources with essentially no rules other than just keep using them. That's always the part that comes, and I understand why an airline argues that they need that, right? If they have to rebuy the slots or lease them out every year or something like that, or it becomes a bidding war, it becomes challenging to build a hub in an airport that is slot restricted. But also it is a public resource that was basically given for free to one company and the other companies can't use it. So I go back and forth on that one a lot.
So let's talk a little bit about airports. So is this particularly for American JFK, or is there another airport that's also they're struggling to keep their slots?
So there's only, it's weird in the US. There's, if I remember this correctly, and I'll probably get some of it wrong, JFK and LaGuardia I know JFK is. I think it's just JFK is considered an IATA level 3 airport, which is truly slot restricted, where all the slots have to be accounted for in that manner. LaGuardia and DCA, and I can't remember which way LaGuardia goes. LaGuardia may also be, or it's close. DCA is slot restricted in that the government, there's a federal law that says only this many planes can take off and land here every day, and they're allocated. So those are also allocated. Interestingly, right? There's also the radius rules, what's it called? Perimeter rules at both LaGuardia and National that limit how far planes can fly in many cases. San Francisco, LA, and O'Hare and Newark are what's called slot coordinated instead of slot restricted or slot controlled. And the coordinated basically means that everybody has to tell the DOT what they're going to do. And the DOT sort of says, okay, we're keeping an eye on you. And publishes guidelines of sort of how many operations are allowed at any given time and expects everybody to cooperate with that. This actually became an issue, we've talked about this a little bit on the show before, with Spirit and I think JetBlue and a couple others trying to get, and maybe Southwest wanted some Newark slots and wanted United to give some up. And what's interesting about that is, United comes back and says, it's not slot restricted. You can do whatever you want here. But the DOT has said, and Newark was slot restricted for a while and went and downgraded to slot coordinated, I want to say 2015 or so. And when that happened, the DOT said, we're going to downgrade this and let y'all behave, everybody play nice and everything will be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you start to cause trouble again, we reserve the right to reimpose restrictions. And if we do that, it's going to be based on historical usage or historical assignments. So no one the new entrant airlines that want to grow there don't want to grow too much, because if they do and things switch back, they'd have to cut all their flights, and the legacy United wouldn't.
Yep.
They also complain that United squats on its slots there and either uses them similar to these routes for short things that no one ever really flies, or cancels a lot of flights and uses its slot portfolio as padding for the schedule. So,
is Newark what United is squatting on in this instance, or is it JFK?
It's LaGuardia slots with United.
Oh, it's LaGuardia. Okay,
LaGuardia to Dulles.
Interesting.
Yeah. So and I'm sure there's something at Newark also, but LaGuardia to Dulles used to fly a couple times a day, and now is obscene number of frequencies. And I'm sure part of that is also Houston demand is down and Chicago demand is down, so they're not flying those hourly like they necessarily did before. So they got to do something with the slots, and this is the cheapest way to keep them.
Yeah. Okay. So I have kind of a random tangent on this. How does this work with, the perimeter rule at LaGuardia says, I think it's 1,500 miles or something, 1,600 miles is the max. So I think the furthest flight to LaGuardia is Denver.
So it's 1,500 or Denver. Denver's actually too far. Dallas, I think, is the furthest you can get.
So
or
what
Houston
does it take?
Is a little further, but yeah.
How do you get these restrictions lifted, or you're kind of removed from these restrictions? How do you do that? Is there a way, a waiver
for the perimeter rule?
Yeah,
Saturdays. There's no perimeter rule on Saturdays.
I'm amazed then that United doesn't fly something like San Francisco LaGuardia
on Saturdays.
Yeah.
So Spirit had an LA flight.
Yeah,
they launched it Saturday only. I don't even know if it actually launched. They announced it. So it was supposed to happen. I don't know what the situation there is, but it's mostly because Saturdays are low demand, and why would you try to run a premium business route that can't do that? Aruba, Continental way back in the day did Aruba on Saturdays because it also had pre-clearance. So you could do international service in and out without needing to staff CBP there. So that was a popular, or I don't know about popular, but that one happened. Ski resorts in the winter.
Yeah.
Out west will get them. So DFW and Houston are inside the rule. Austin is just outside 1,500 miles.
Oh, wow.
To LaGuardia. So Austin is 1520. So you can't fly all the way. They can't get a nonstop to Austin.
I'm sure America would actually love to offer that.
I'm sure a lot of airlines would.
That seems like one that would make some money.
I mean, United used to. Back when I flew it for work, United made plenty of money off of me offering Newark Austin nonstop 3 or 4 times a day. So
yeah, exactly.
And the perimeter is different in DC. The perimeter rule at DC is 1,250 miles, but there's also by legislation a certain number of perimeter exemption slots, and those are allowed to fly longer distances. So you can fly a transcon to Portland or Seattle or LA or Phoenix. There's a few other routes that get those flights that you wanted to do this weekend.
And we'll talk about those in the bonus episode. But and flights I will take tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about
unless you get bumped again.
Maybe we'll see. JetBlue's cutting some London flights in October.
Yeah, when they launched the service, they announced that they were going to cut down to 4x weekly.
Okay.
In September, because the rules, the border isn't open yet, and they were hoping that would change and that they'd be able to start increasing, demand with if the U.S. would start to let Europeans enter without quarantine restrictions, or let non-citizens enter from Europe without quarantine restrictions. I guess is the real quirk there, but whatever. It's easier just to say Europeans are banned and not get into the reality of the rule. It's one of those things that's got a lot of nuance to it, but at the end of the day, how it actually applies is effectively Europeans can't come in. So that didn't happen. And so they just updated their schedules in the last week or so and have extended those similar cuts through October. What's different is that the Gatwick service launches at the end of September. So now they're going to have 4 flights a week to and from Heathrow, and 4 flights a week to and from Gatwick. And this goes back to the slots issue, where if the slots are allocated and you're running them, you have to fly. Currently, the exemption is 50%, not 80%. So 4 days a week is sufficient. So they'll do doubles on Monday. They do both, departing JFK, And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is Gatwick, and Wednesday, Friday, Sunday is Heathrow, I think. So now they have daily service to London as of the end of the month. It's interesting. They also, speaking of sort of weird partnership with American and the Northeast Alliance, they also now carry Americans' flights to Heathrow now carry a JetBlue flight number on them.
Americans' flights to Heathrow carry JetBlue flight numbers.
So JetBlue code shares on those flights. So JetBlue can actually sell flights to Heathrow every day because American still has double daily published. And then on days where JetBlue also operates, there's more.
Does anyone else operate Gatwick?
No.
From JFK? I didn't think so.
No, Norwegian did up to 3 times daily back in the day. Presumably Norse, when it takes flight next year, will choose to do so as well. Somewhat bizarre side note, there was a Norse Atlantic flight attendant on the inaugural JetBlue flight to Heathrow. It was just like, and it was the day they announced to their staff that they weren't going to fly till next year. But he was just happened to be there for fun anyways and had bought a ticket. So.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
interesting.
It's nice to have geeks work in the cabin.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Eastern.
Can we talk just a little bit more about JetBlue for a sec there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Do you see any way in which this route actually works for them financially?
Like Heathrow or London? In general?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an optimist. I hope it works. I think business travel is going to have to come back soon. If they're going to keep it. I don't know that there's enough leisure traffic right now or in the near future when you have people like BA and AA offering flights pretty much every hour during.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously those numbers are scaled back now, but like I don't know. We talked about it a couple weeks ago when I did the trip and like not having a lounge. Does that really matter? I don't know, but like Concorde Room is open again now. Clubhouse is open again now. Polaris lounges are not yet, but they probably will be. Right? Like that's a hard thing to solve. It's such a small plane, and I could get it if you can. Half the plane is business class stuff. They can get those mid seats filled. It'll work, but there's just so much capacity they're competing against. It's hard for me to see how that.
I think that's the problem, right? Because like when Newark London is running normally, it's going to be 787s and 763s high density.
Yeah, which is a lot of business class seats.
A lot of business class seats, and there's a reason United's not doing that right now, right? Like I
thought they're switching back to the high J's, but not the.
Yeah, you're right. Like I think
in the winter.
But I mean, still, I don't think they're running their normal 4 flights to Heathrow.
6. It was 6 at one point, right? I mean, there's a morning flight, and then I think 4 or 5 in the evening. So, but yeah, like I it's just all those things. It's hard for me to see how a couple, twice daily split across airports, or even 3 times daily, can compete again in the business traveler market against airlines running, 4 to 6 daily, and with partners potentially even more than that. And then also, when your goal is to pick up all the business travelers, and then you can't compete aggressively in the economy class side when you've got someone throwing an all economy 787 at it, or mostly economy 787 at it, which is going to happen again soon. And I mean, who knows how much money Norse is willing to lose on that route, or maybe try to make, obviously. But like, I don't know. It's hard for me to see good upside for them on this. I don't know.
But I mean, that's like the other challenge too, right? Is that they're focused solely, or it feels like they're focused solely on East Coast to London, right? Like they can't even really feed the route from some of their West Coast or further west destinations.
Yeah, there's a couple routes, but so it depends on the timing and whatnot. Part of that was what slots could they get. With the earlier westbound flight now out of Heathrow, it does actually offer connections onward. I'm going to London again in December for a conference. And was looking for ways to get from there to Las Vegas to go to yet another conference the following week, and was like, maybe I'll just fly out and spend the weekend instead of coming home first. And JetBlue will now sell me the connection onward to Vegas, because I think maybe it was only the Gatwick flight, but it had the right times to do that. I'm probably not going to take that, but just because I'd rather one long, one short, or a nonstop. But it was an interesting. Sort of, they are starting to sell some of those connections. I don't know. I too, I want to be optimistic. I want it to work out. I think they teased Manchester and Glasgow as other routes potentially next summer, which okay, those don't scream business to me. Like
I could see, if you were going to do it, I would see Dublin, right? Like if you're going to focus on business routes, I would say Dublin or Edinburgh. At least then you got some colleges to.
Yeah.
you're sending people
aren't businesses, but they are. Actually, they are. It depends on what it is, but
I mean, I think like Dublin's got. I mean, it's a huge tech city, and if you fed it right, maybe it would make sense. I don't know. I don't know what that's the thing. I don't really know who flies JetBlue. Like, I don't. Is it the Southwest or the Northeast? Is that kind of the way it's viewed? I don't know. I have taken them once.
Yeah. No, I think it's a lot of VFR traffic visiting friends and relatives.
Yeah.
Most of that's into the Caribbean and Latin America, but there's a decent amount of it in the rest of the network as well. Right. If you look at sort of where their sort of capacity splits, it's the VFR into that part, into the Caribbean and Latin America, and north-south shuttles between Florida and, New York to New England.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, and they're picking up competition in those, though. I mean, Frontier's attacking heavily into the Caribbean. Avelo's launching New Haven to Florida. Like, it's not that any company ever has a good opportunity to just sit still and roll through cash flow, or at least in the airline world. But I feel like they're getting squeezed a little bit here. It's gonna be interesting to see what the next few years bring.
Yeah, I think really the thing to watch is what is going to happen with business traffic in general across the ocean.
Yeah.
And if things continue with Europe shutting down non-essential U.S. travel, I don't see things going well for JetBlue long term on those slots. So
yeah, that's going to be really hard to figure out. I mean, the good news is they said, we can just take some of the seats out and make them look, a little less business heavy, a little more economy friendly, and try to sell more seats that way. But
yeah, so I mean, I think they have a plan, which is good. I think a lot of businesses don't really have a plan right now. They at least have a fallback. So.
Yeah, I'd rather op-ups for all of my fares instead.
Wouldn't we all? So now tell me about Eastern's cargo insanity.
So imagine you want to run a cargo airline, but you don't actually want to have cargo planes. This announcement came out last week, and they said they've got feedstock for 35 777s. They're going to look at 777-200, 200ER, and 300, but not the 300ER nor the 200LR. And the 300ER, Israeli Aerospace Industries and the leasing company GCAS already have a program in place that they're making conversions of. The first one is in Tel Aviv getting worked on now, if I remember correctly. And the 200LR is the base model for what Boeing uses for its freighter model. So those, and Delta had its old LRs. Those went, I think there's one in Washington State that's being converted now. And actually did a few test flights in recent months. So those are like real cargo freighters where they're cutting a giant hole and putting a full door in upstairs and reinforcing the main deck so they can put rollers and, pallets and things like that on board. That's expensive and heavy and complicated and takes a long time to do. Yep. Or you could do what Eastern is doing, which is basically take the planes, put a barricade up between the entry doorway, or probably just aft of the main entry door. So the pilots have a little bit of room to sit and, do their thing where the front galley is. And then everything aft of that becomes a isolated and secured cargo facility with the necessary smoke detector stuff and whatnot, which is called It's like Class E. There's different ratings depending on what types of services and whatnot are available. But so a real cargo space, but without anything else that looks cargo-y in there. So no rollers on the floor, no containers sliding in.
So who gets to load these planes?
So
it sounds terrible.
It's basically like we've seen it already, for the last 18 months, right? We joked and called them COVID combis on the Twitters. And there's over 100 planes that airlines took out seats and basically put netting in, and people would manually load boxes and stack them up, and then they'd cover them with nets to lock them down, and the plane would do its flight and whatever, and then someone would unlatch the nets at the other end and, back and forth. It is slower. The key there is that most of the stuff on the main deck is much lighter weight than sort of heavier bulk cargo that would go in normal containers on the underbelly. And so, or just, I guess, the regular belly, not the underbelly. That's more sinister sounding. But it's really interesting. A few people pointed out to me that Airborne Express, which is now part of DHL, but when it originally started in the 1940s, was a airline that flew flowers from Hawaii to the mainland. And it did so in a very similar way. They sort of just they put them sort of in the main cabin deck of passenger planes. And so I think it's an interesting approach. It's certainly the 777s are cheap right now. The conversion process is going to be relatively inexpensive. They're basically just going to take everything out of the main cabin area, right? Put some mount points. They've got, I guess you use the rails, the seat rails, and put, tie down bolts on those and use those to secure netting or whatever. But take all the galleys and stuff and lavatories out. Maybe some smoke detectors and additional fire suppression systems. They've created their own MRO maintenance facility to do the certification and installation. They sort of hinted that they might try to sell that option to other third parties after they get it done and working on their own. And if things go to plan, they actually are planning on creating their own sort of container, but it's a container that'll still just fit through the regular passenger boarding door in a 777.
So as part of this, are they like not going to do charter passenger ops, or is that still a thing?
The 777s that were originally supposed to do passenger operations when they bought their first couple now almost certainly will not. What remains to be seen is if the 767s continue to do passenger operations. And there have been some rumors circulating that they're going to try to get out of that business. I would be surprised by that. But anything's possible.
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking like they probably have a decent charter contract set up for things like military charters and stuff.
Yeah, I say DOD does decent business with them. I'm not sure like the Guayaquil flights or Georgetown, none of those are making great money right now. Like they ran Eastern ran a ton of evacuation and repatriation flights in early 2020. And I'm sure those were very profitable. I think it participated. I don't think it did craft flights, but I think they did participate in some of the evacuation flights onward, right? Some as charter operator. So there's definitely money to be made in that segment, and I think they were doing pretty well in it. I'm not sure the scheduled service really was doing great. Yeah. And then you get the question of, then how many 767s do you keep around in that configuration?
Yep.
And crew and everything else that goes with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. It's wild that, a lot of these airlines doing cargo ops. I mean, Amazon Prime's kind of exploded, right? Like Prime Air.
Yeah.
And just general operations that some of these carriers are doing. United's even flying crazy routes for cargo.
Yeah, and United was one of the ones that I don't think United took seats out. Air Canada did at one point, either 777-300s though, right? And some of their Q400s with Jazz. Like they did it all the way up and down the sides of the fleet. There's been a lot of them going around in different sizes and shapes. It's super interesting to me, but I actually just putting stuff, in the main cabin and sort of into netting is one thing. I really can't wait to see. They have said that they're going to try to have their own sort of custom containerized main deck operation.
You want to see what they're actually doing.
I think it's going to be trolley carts. Right? Well, imagine if you could actually load up trolley carts, and maybe you make them double wide trolley carts because they just have to fit through the relatively wide 777 door. Yep. But you make like a double wide trolley cart. You can load it up on the ground, put it on the scissor lift, roll it right into the plane, get it to wherever it needs to be, lock the wheels, clamp it down. Right? Like I could actually see that as being not containerized efficient, or like LD3, whatever the big, bulk containers that you normally see loaded, but darn close at some level.
Yeah.
So those are supposed to come around. They said the first plane's going to be flying Q1. The containerish stuff is maybe Q2 of next year. So not that far away. And then maybe somewhere down the line, if they really, really are getting good at this cargo thing, they'll start cutting holes in the door and put in real cargo services, or holes in the fuselage, whatever. But yeah, it's the whole making their own containers and sort of just pretending these planes are all cargo now is really interesting.
Yeah. We're a cargo airline now. Why? Because we said so.
That's where the money is.
Yeah, exactly. Jet2, right, which is a kind of a low-cost carrier, right?
So they consider themselves a holiday carrier. They sell vacation packages,
even
in the UK.
Fancier.
Yeah,
they're moving to all Airbus.
Not all, but they are adding the A321neo to their fleet. So 232 seats on board. That's a slight give back from the 240 seat maximum. So, they're very generous that way. But it's going to be, I think they're doing something like 36 and then 14 options or something, or 24 options, 26 and 24 options, something like that. It's a lot of planes coming. One of the, and they previously were an all 737 and 757 operation. They had one or two leased A321s in last season or the season before. So they sort of know how they work in the operation. It's more capacity. It's a lot more seats, right? It's like 50 more seats than what they were getting on the old planes, 45 more, 186 to 232, whatever that math is. And it's a lot of extra planes. So they have the opportunity to either retire the old planes and sort of maintain or flex up and keep growing depending on what the market looks like.
Wow.
So it's, I would say probably not great news for Boeing. Right, this is you can argue either this is what the NMA middle market whatever aircraft was supposed to replace, or just that The MAX didn't fit the bill. But to see an airline say, you know what, we could very easily transition to the MAX given our pilots and everything else, but we're not gonna. And we want the bigger plane from Airbus. And then, right, they don't need the range on it, given the routes they fly, but they certainly want the capacity and the fuel efficiency. So that's interesting, surprising, fun. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of people on a plane. That's for sure.
It's a lot of people on a single aisle plane.
Yeah.
A lot of people on any plane, honestly. Like, it's actually, when you think about it, like, United's, most of the 767s were fewer seats.
Yeah.
Like,
it's crazy.
Most long-haul 767s are smaller than that. So,
yeah. Speaking of high density, Virgin Atlantic is going to have a high density A350.
Yeah. This is not quite to the level of the Air France CIO market, Caribbean and Indian Ocean markets, which were like no business class, only premium economy, heavy. And they were some of the first 10 across 777s that Air France had also. So those were super high density. This is not quite that crazy. But it's a smaller business class cabin and a bigger focus on economy class and premium economy. And I think to me, the most interesting part is, Virgin has, I don't want to say always, but pretty much always had some sort of social gathering area on board, and they're keeping that. But it's like, instead of the normal, like, it's not the bar area, and I want to get the word right, and it's like the Nook or something like that.
That sounds like them.
Yeah. Oh, why don't you have this on the website where I thought you were going to have it? Darn it. Yeah, it's. Sorry, I'm going to see if I can find it while we're still talking here. It's really it's like a 2-person bench with a little table that slips down. So I almost want to be like, why bother? But I guess they have to say they still have something on board. I don't understand, like, a weird 2-person sit together area.
Yeah.
Sort of in the middle of the galley.
It's a weird setup. And who's going to, I'm just trying to think about people doing, let's sit together while people look at us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess people can walk by and whatever, so there's something of that nature. But there's, excuse me, to me, it really is more about the, like, why would you only have an area that can seat 2 people as your public, like, onboard experience? It seems too small to me. And I don't know, I struggle with that. I'm sorry, my laptop is really not happy about trying to load the page that I know has this story on it. Stupid JavaScript. The booth. I was close.
Oh, I mean, it's close. Yeah, the
Nook the booth.
Yeah, it's close. It's close.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll put a link to this. But 40. It's going to have 16 upper class seats. And it's the upper class suite, so like they are solo seats, which is fine. 56 premium economy and 325 economy. So.
Wow.
Doing quick math there, 60, 72, just under 400 seats on an A350, 1,000. Wow. I mean, it's the booth, it's a cute little thing, but it's only on one side. There's a couple screens, and you can sort of share audio, and a flight attendant can come up and bring you snacks and drinks, but...
it's a gimmick.
Yeah. I don't know. Pre-book it for candlelit dining? Like,
oh, you got it for your romantic outing?
Yeah. Heathrow to Orlando gets it first in December.
Oh, for all your Disney needs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
Well, that's why you got a higher capacity cabin for sure.
Well, while they're doing that, KLM is cutting routes. Las Vegas, Orlando, and Miami are cut for the winter, mostly because the Netherlands is closing.
Well, I mean, not entirely closing. They're not just like shutting down.
They're closing to us.
Yeah, they're not shutting down and just letting the water be in. Just turn off the windmills. Let the pumps go dark. No, they
we give up.
Yeah, stupid ocean thing. The EU guidance changed last week, and the US is now considered a high risk COVID environment. And what's interesting about that is as written, it sort of says, it's the EU rules on this are all. It's guidance, not mandate. But it basically says the suggestion was that European countries should stop allowing unvaccinated visitors, even if they're tested. It's the short version of that. And thus far, I can't think. I'm trying to think of the countries that have sort of changed anything. I don't think any have taken that approach. I think they're either saying we still don't let anyone in, or we're stopping letting anyone in, or we're staying open like we were. And the Netherlands has taken these sort of, we're just going to not let people in again without quarantine, which is sort of the asterisk of all of this. Like, you can go, it's just a 10-day quarantine. You can test out after day 5. But for most people, that's, not reasonable in terms of how to do a quick vacation, certainly.
Can we just let's stop and talk about that for a second? Doesn't this seem like it's a little too late at this point? Like, shouldn't this have been done immediately if they were really worried about U.S. travelers?
So what it really comes down to, yes, one would argue, but what it really comes down to is the one comment I saw that was super funny about it to me was something like, the U.S. is such high risk, we have to we can't let them in. Also, they won't let us in, so we better not let them in. Like, is it because it's high risk, or is it reciprocity?
Yeah.
And I would be willing to bet it is much more a reciprocity thing than a risk thing. And I'm not sure that the U.S. should still not let arrivals from Europe in, given vaccination rates. I'd like to say allowing vaccinated travelers or vaccinated plus tested travelers is certainly a very low risk scenario. And at least thus far, the U.S. has managed to do that with minimal actual real paperwork and burden on the government. They just make the airlines figure it out.
Yep.
So, and I'm sure the airlines would be, ecstatic to try to figure out how to do that. But they'll do what they have to do to get the seats filled and get the planes flying again. So it's an interesting one to me. I use that word way too often. But, when you get TAP Air Portugal advertising that, hey, everybody look over here because Portugal is not going to lock you out. We'll be happy to take you. Come fly this way instead. It makes for a very interesting situation. I think the KLM press release said something to the effect of, while the Netherlands is doing this, most other countries in Europe aren't triple locking the doors. And cited France and Italy also as countries that aren't completely locking things down, even though the Netherlands is. So,
I mean, at one point, I think I'm just thinking about, okay, if you fly to Portugal, there's literally nothing to stop you from using a land border to go to the Netherlands.
Or an airplane.
Or an airplane domestically, right? Because they're not going to check.
Well, Schengen domestically.
That's what I mean. I mean, when I think of European internal European travel, I think of it as domestic, right? Because it is very much like you're lucky if they look at your passport.
In the U.S., I think of it the same way, and that is because, again, for the same reasons. Like, I have to take my paperwork with me, but no one's going to check it at a border. I don't have to worry about stamps and those lines. But also, we learned real quickly last year that they can put those borders back in a heartbeat if they want to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's fascinating to me is that it's, the Netherlands is closed if you fly to the Netherlands from the United States. But if you come in through another country, nothing we can do about it.
Well, they can, in theory. Whether they do or not remains to be seen. And a lot of it is, again, it's not that you can't come in, it's that you have to quarantine. And so I assume it will be, like many places, okay, go quarantine now. And they assume that you will. It's not to the level of Australia with their ridiculously big brotherly. You have to have this app on with geolocation services enabled, and we can text you at any. We can call you at any time, and within 15 minutes, you have to text back a selfie showing yourself obviously in that location with other landmarks around you to prove it.
Yep.
Or we know that you're cheating. That is a lot.
Isn't it weird how it's two extremes, and then there's us?
Which one are?
Well, I guess. I mean, I guess it's more. There's two extremes, and then there's Europe.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. I don't know. Is in some ways is at one extreme, but otherwise isn't. As long as you can get here, it's fine. But there are still swaths of the world where we are not allowing non-citizens and non-residents to enter from without just to enter from. I mean, I remember watching people getting passports checked on my JetBlue flight home from London the other day, where there was a separate line and a guy on a cell phone, okay, give me your stack of passports. Let's go make the phone calls. And people with UK passports sorting out, are they a permanent resident? Do they have the right paperwork? Is this one allowed? Because it was so new, they didn't know everything. But he literally group by group would call them in and have someone verify a passport number that it was in the right list.
Wow.
So, the U.S. is, once you get here, there's no rules and it's a mess in many places. But
yeah. Southwest, double tier points. What's going on?
Yeah, man. Double points. You want A-list or A-list plus status, but not companion pass. At least from what I could see in the fine print. Everything through November 30th because, demand is down. They had to cut a bunch of flights because they overran their schedule and pissed people off, mostly crew. But yeah, they're going to try to gather some more elites. To me, it's just interesting to see what different airlines are doing to try to attract that last couple dollars of whatever spend might be happening this year.
Yeah,
I don't know if you call it the Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day holiday, or whatever else, like when other people are going to take that vacation trip. This one goes through Thanksgiving, it's through November 30th, so that would be included. But I don't know. It's that versus Delta, just give it to everybody another year, versus United's weirdly targeted stuff, versus Americans, like whatever the hell they're doing with credit card related spend to earn more bonus points.
I mean, I'm interested to see we'll talk a little bit about Alaska and the bonus topics, but I'm interested to see what Alaska does, because their bonus, EQM bonus, their elite bonus ends at the end of September.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they've got a ton of elites coming back.
Yeah. So it's, we'll see. Yeah, I just like watching how all those things play out. Like, and so the Southwest one is like, oh, you have to register to get this promotion, which is just obnoxious, because like, just give it to people. Like, why? Like, I get penalized because I didn't read your emails. Okay, fine, but like, I don't know. Like, it's why do you make it that hard to give people this thing, and that you want them to do anyways? And then also they're not requiring you to buy new tickets. Existing purchases count.
Oh wow.
Which is, I mean, Southwest of any airline with the like no change fees thing has always been no change fees. It would have been relatively easy to reissue a ticket assuming the fares are the same. Yeah. So, but now this is sort of with everybody. I wonder how much that rule is going to go away, or if it's going to make people go back and look and be like, oh, I should have checked this. The fares have all gone down. I want credits now. Reminds me I should go check some of mine, but I don't know. They seemed cheap enough at the time. I'm not that worried.
Yeah.
Except one. There's one stupid trip that I'm really annoyed about how expensive it was. So,
anything else you want to chat about?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Can't wait to explain why you're the Colonel.
Yeah, I'm the Colonel, and we're going to talk a little bit about World Heritage Sites in the bonus episode. So if you want to hear that, you can join us on Patreon and get access to that. If you are a Patreon subscriber, just stay tuned. But to our listeners, thanks for listening. Leave us a comment, tweet us. You can find us on Twitter at DotsLines, moredotsmorelines.com. Till next time. Happy travels. Bye-bye.
Take care.